Okay, in this session, we're going to be covering chapter 25, which is fluid balance and electrolytes. Okay, so before and this is going to tie nicely into chapter 24 when we talked about kidneys. So, human body is anywhere between 45 and 75% fluid by weight. The average number among the population is generally about 65%. And this percentage changes based on several factors. Age is a big factor, so younger individuals tend to have a little higher fluid percentage, and also the amount of skeletal muscle versus adipose tissue, because skeletal muscle cells are about 75% fluid, and the adipose cells or adipose tissue is about 20% water. And so people with more adipose tissue in their body would have a lower fluid percentage of their body. We're going to now look at the compartments, like where the fluid is in your body. So I'm going to share the screen with you here. And this image right here is from your textbook, and it is figure 25.1, so it's on the very first page here. So we need to be able to describe the fluid and where the fluid is located. And we can actually go by the rule of thirds. So most of the fluid in your body is going to, let's just divide the fluid first. Okay. We can talk about intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid, and we've already talked about we use these terms many times over the course of A&P, whether it's A&P1 or A&P2. You've heard these, okay? But just to summarize this, intracellular fluid is the fluid that is found inside of your cell, inside cellular cell. Extracellular fluid is the fluid that's outside of your cells. About 2/3 of your total body fluid, about 2/3 is going to be inside of your cells. And about 1/3 of all your fluid in your body is going to be the extracellular fluid. We can actually divide extracellular fluid even further into interstitial fluid, which is about 2/3 of the ECF or extracellular fluid, and then blood plasma, which is also a type of extracellular fluid, and that's about 1/3 of the extracellular fluid. Okay, so this goes like this. We don't divide intracellular fluid into anything. Intracellular fluid is just intracellular fluid. Okay, but the extracellular fluid can be divided this way. So that's the location of the fluid in our body. And in the last video, we talked about kind of in general how fluid moves, and the movement of fluid between these compartments is dependent on the concentration of the fluids. Okay, so concentration of solutes and proteins also in the different compartments. Okay, water generally moves, well, always moves towards the higher concentration of solute. All right, so that's kind of the movement of the fluid here. So if you drink water, and we talked about this last time, if you drink water, the water is going to go into your digestive system. From your digestive system, the water is going to be absorbed into your blood. When you absorb water into your blood, this is going to lower the concentration of your blood, okay, and makes your blood a little more diluted. Now that is going to throw off the balance between the interstitial fluid and your blood plasma, right? And so that's going to cause the water to actually start moving towards the interstitial fluid. And then that's diluting the interstitial fluid. Now that's going to be less concentrated inside of the cell, and ultimately water will move towards the cells, okay, inside of the cell. If you don't replace water that leaves your body fast enough, then opposite would be happening. If you're losing water and you're not replacing it, your blood is getting too concentrated, okay, and ultimately that would cause the pull of the water from the cells into the blood plasma to maintain balance. So that's the movement of fluid between the compartments. Let's look at fluid intake, fluid output, and then we'll look at some fluid imbalances here. So I'm going to go right here. Okay, so this figure right here shows you the way that your body can receive fluid, or water really is what we're talking about here, and then fluid output. Okay, for fluid intake, most comes from drink and food, so from your digestive system. What you eat and what you drink is the majority of the water that is in your body. However, a little bit of water comes from what we call metabolic water. So there are reactions that happen in your body that produce water as a byproduct. It's not very much. It's about 200 milliliters on average, which is about 2/3 of a Coke can volume of water. But the majority of the of the water comes from eating and drinking. Okay, fluid output, there is a bit more going on this side when you look at the fluid output here. Okay, so I'm looking right here. And ideally, you want fluid intake to be equal to the fluid output, okay? Because if it's not, then imbalances could happen. So for the fluid output, you can notice that there are several ways that we can actually categorize these outputs, these different outputs. So I'm going to look at the facultative and obligatory first. Okay, facultative fluid output. Okay, there's only one thing. Okay, that's right here. I meant to use yellow, but there's only one thing that belongs into the facultative fluid output, and that is the facultative formation of urine. So facultative means it's able to adapt to needs, right? So facultative fluid output depends on how hydrated you are. Okay, that's facultative. Now, obligatory, if you look at what belongs into the obligatory part, these things happen in your body no matter how hydrated you are. You cannot control them, okay, anyway. And so we have expired air, okay, right here. That's the air that you breathe out, and the water loss that is part of that air. And you know that you're losing water whenever you breathe, because if you've ever like cleaned your glasses or maybe your phone screen or something, you breathe on it and it gets foggy, and that's the condensation of the water that you just exhaled on that surface. Okay, so we do lose water by simply breathing. We do lose some water through sweat. And I mean, this would obviously, differ as much as how much it would be, but it depends on your physical activity and various other things. But we do lose water through sweat. We lose quite a bit of water through cutaneous transpiration. That's this thing right here. And cutaneous transpiration is not exactly like sweat. Okay, so sweat comes from your sweat glands. Cutaneous transpiration is simply water evaporating through your skin. That happens, okay? You don't have to be doing anything. You can just be sitting on the couch watching Netflix, but you're losing water, okay? Your skin is letting some water through. Okay, so that's cutaneous transpiration. And then the last two are feces and obligatory formation of urine. Okay, so even if you're dehydrated, your body will produce some amount of urine. And I know feces, we think about this being solid waste, but it's not completely dry. There is water that is lost through the feces generally, always as well. The obligatory formation of urine. Okay, I just said that it doesn't really matter on the state of your hydration. It's the minimum amount of urine that your body has to produce in order to effectively get rid of all the wastes that your body needs to get rid of. Okay, so there's that obligatory volume. Anything above that 500 milliliters is going to be facultative. Okay, so the more fluid that you drink, the more facultative urine formation you would be seeing. Okay, now this other division, sensible versus insensible. Okay, your textbook says that the insensible fluid output is the one that you cannot measure, but then I always think about, okay, so if you cannot measure it, how did they come up with these values or volumes? So what I think about when I look at this division here is the insensible fluid output is really water being lost as a vapor. And so even though sweat, you can see sweat, collecting on your skin, ultimately it evaporates. Okay, a lot of that sweat evaporates. So that's what I'm thinking. And then expired air, you can't really see. Cutaneous transpiration, you can't really see. Feces and urine is more of an actual water, okay, being lost there, and that's the sensible part, okay. So make sure that before the exam you're able to categorize these fluid outputs, and based on both criteria, facultative and obligatory versus sensible and insensible fluid outputs. All right, let's look at some fluid imbalances really quickly. And fluid imbalance is when whenever your fluid output and fluid intake are not doing the same thing. So they're not matching up, they're not equal to each other. Or you can have also fluid imbalance when the volume is normal, but it's not distributed correctly, or it's not distributed like it normally should be, okay? So we can look at two different types of fluid imbalances. We can look at fluid imbalance that does not involve change in osmolarity. And osmolarity simply is concentration, okay? And then we can also look at fluid imbalances that do involve changes in osmolarity. So under the fluid imbalance with constant osmolarity, there, and both of these terms are going to include the word volume, okay? So one is going to be volume depletion, the other one is volume excess. Volume depletion is when you are losing isotonic fluid faster than you're gaining the isotonic fluid. So this could include vomiting or diarrhea. You're losing water, but you're also losing ions and everything that was in that water. Also, like hemorrhaging would be the same thing. You're losing the whole volume, not just water, not just H2O, but you're losing ions or electrolytes as well. Severe burns can also be an example or a reason for volume depletion. Volume excess is where you have greater gain of isotonic fluid than fluid loss. And this generally is due to the fact like where your fluid intake is normal. So it's not like you're taking extra isotonic fluid into your body. Your fluid intake is normal, but your kidneys are not functioning properly. So renal failure can be a reason for volume excess, where you're not eliminating the urine and electrolytes fast as you should be. So that's volume excess. But so volume depletion and volume excess, the osmolarity of the fluid in your compartments is the same, okay? It's not changing. You're just changing volume, but the concentration stays the same. Now, fluid imbalances with changes in osmolarity, where you're going to see movement of it between compartments here, include dehydration and hypotonic hydration. Dehydration is where there's a greater water loss than your solute loss, okay? So you're losing water, okay? Electrolytes are kind of staying behind, and you're replenishing that water fast enough for your body, okay? So increased sweating could include this or cause this. Diabetes can cause this as well. Drinking alcohol, and then antidiuretic hormone can also cause this if you have like malfunctioning of this mechanism. Okay. You need to come, baby. Sorry. So that's dehydration, and then hypotonic hydration is opposite. Hypotonic hydration is where this is also known as positive water balance or water intoxication. This is where you have lost the water and solutes, And instead of replacing water and solutes, you're just replacing water, okay? Or you're drinking too much water. There is such a thing as drinking too much water. And if you have ever ran like a 5K or a 10K or anything like that, usually they will have stations that provide water as well as Gatorade. So if you are doing, like, let's say you're running a marathon or even a 10K, as you're doing this this physical activity, you're losing water. Your body is losing water, but it's also losing electrolytes. So if you just replace water and not the electrolytes, you're going to make the concentration of your blood too low, okay? And that's going to cause basically too much water in your blood compared to the interstitial fluid and the cells, and it will cause water rushing towards the cell really quickly. I don't know why my watch is talking to me, sorry. And so so basically your interstitial fluid and your cells are getting drowned by this water. So that's hypotonic hydration. There have been cases, I have not heard of cases anytime recently, but there were cases that used excessive drinking as a form of hazing for fraternities, and there were people that died because they would be forced to chug, all this water, and it caused this hypotonic hydration. And so, yeah, too much water can be bad. All right. So those are the fluid imbalances. Now, the last thing about the fluid, well, it's kind of an imbalance. It's fluid sequestration. And fluid sequestration is where you have normal fluid volume in your body, but it's not distributed properly for various reasons. And you can actually see that here. So if you look at this person, this person is experiencing edema. And edema is where you have accumulation of fluid in one area. So this leg right here, it's not fat leg. This is swollen leg, okay, because it has fluid that's not being removed for one reason or another from that area. So this may be a lymphedema, I don't know. So you can have impaired lymphatic system that's not removing fluid efficiently from the area, and that could cause the edema. We also talked about edema when we talked about cardiovascular system and how your ventricles are supposed to be pumping equal amounts of blood. And if they're not, you can experience systemic or pulmonary edema because there's a backup of blood in capillaries, which causes increased infiltration, which causes fluid to be pushed out into that area. So that's what that part B and C can show you there. So those are our fluid imbalances. And there's a little interesting clinical view that talks about dehydration in infants and elderly. These two groups are most prone to fluid imbalances, to experience fluid imbalances. When you think about infants have higher metabolic rate. They also don't have kidneys that work as efficiently as an adult, so their kidneys are still learning to eliminate fluid, and so they are not concentrating urine as much as or as efficiently as in adults in fully developed kidneys. And so there is a greater water loss through the kidneys. The infants have a higher skin surface to volume ratio, and for that reason, they lose water through cutaneous transpiration at a faster rate than what we see in adults. And yeah, those are like the main ones. They also cannot regulate their homeostasis and their temperature as efficiently as adults can. And their fevers tend to last higher. They might be experiencing higher fluid loss through sweating during that time as well. And then on the other hand, elderly, we also see them being more prone to fluid imbalances, but there are different reasons here. The elderly usually are experiencing loss of muscle and increase in adipose tissue. So because loss of skeletal muscle, you're going to see elderly being on that closer to that 45% fluid by weight range. Their kidneys also become less effective. So, when you're an infant, your kidneys are not as effective. They haven't learned to concentrate that urine efficiently yet. And then when you're elderly, they're just no longer working like they should. Okay, so the kidneys are a little less effective. Adults are going to have, elderly, your skin gets thinner. And because your skin gets thinner, you're going to lose water through cutaneous transpiration faster. Okay. The control of thirst center is not as efficient. They might not be drinking as much fluid as they should because the activation of thirst center is not as effective as we age, as well as some elderly people simply limit their fluid intake on purpose because they may be experiencing incontinence. And so these two groups of people are more prone to the fluid imbalances. So in normal, I'm not saying elderly and infants are not normal, but during regular conditions, we regulate our fluid balance as follows. We can regulate fluid intake, and then we regulate fluid output. So we'll first look at the regulation of the fluid intake. To regulate fluid intake, there are various things that your body responds to that activates or deactivates your thirst center. So your thirst center is the part of your body that tells you that you are thirsty. And there are several things that are going to activate your thirst center, okay? The thirst center will be, and I guess we don't really need this picture here, but the thirst center can be activated by decreased salivary secretions, decreased blood osmolarity, and decreased blood pressure. Okay, so those three things are the things that are going to activate your thirst center. They're going to make you feel thirsty. Decreased salivary secretions because you because you're running low on water. You are also going to have decreased salivary secretions. Oh my gosh, quiet, sorry. So if you have low fluid in your body, then the salivary secretions are not going to be as abundant, and that's going to cause your mouth to feel a little drier, and that stimulates the feeling of thirst. Okay. The decreased blood osmolarity makes sense also because if you're low on water and you need to add more water into your body, if you're low on water, that means that you don't have as much water as you should in your blood plasma, and so that's going to cause you to be thirsty, and you add water into your GI tract, and then from your digestive system, it enters the blood. The decreased blood pressure. You have low volume of water, you're going to have low volume of blood, and that causes decreased blood pressure, okay? And so that's why these things are going to activate the thirst center because they kind of have to deal with each other, okay? They have to do with you not having enough fluid in your body. Now, thirst center is turned off by opposite of these conditions, okay? So if you have increased salivary secretions, you have decreased blood osmolarity, and increased blood pressure, these things are going to turn off your thirst center. There's one additional thing that is going to cause your thirst center to be turned off, and that is distension of stomach. So as you eat or drink something, your stomach stretches, okay? So that causes distension. That's distension. That's what that means. And so distension of stomach is going to also turn off your thirst center because it's telling your body that, okay, you just added something into your digestive system, so we should be expecting some water to be coming in. And so it turns off the thirst center. Okay. Generally, I mean, when you eat a meal, you eat food plus something to drink with it. Okay, so that's kind of the idea there. Okay, it's not saying that if you eat a box of crackers, you're not going to be thirsty because your stomach distended. Okay, normal meal is food and the drink as well. So that's how we regulate the thirst center. Now, fluid output is regulated mostly by hormones, and we've already talked about these hormones in cardiovascular system. But let's go ahead and review these. So let me find our hormones here. Notice that I'm skipping over the electrolytes because I've already said the major stuff about these electrolytes in the previous session. Okay, so that's where we discussed them. Make sure that you read over that though, so don't skip it. Okay, I'm just telling you, we've already talked about it, but you should still read that section. Okay. So now I'm going into the hormonal regulation. So let's look at renin-angiotensin system first. And so here's our renin-angiotensin system. This is the longest one because it includes several steps here. But again, this is just a review, so I'm going to kind of fly through this because you already should be able to recall some of this. Okay, so the renin is a substance that comes from your kidneys. It is released by your kidneys by detecting low blood pressure, or it can be stimulated by sympathetic division, okay, to release renin. Renin then enters your bloodstream, and in the bloodstream, it will eventually meet angiotensinogen. Angiotensinogen, okay, right here, comes from the liver. Angiotensinogen is released by the liver continuously. It doesn't really require a stimulus. It's just something that liver produces, and it's always part of your blood. However, angiotensinogen, it has that ending gen. This is an active hormone. Okay, this is an inactive hormone. It needs to find the renin first. So if renin is found in your blood, it will find this angiotensinogen. Okay, they will interact together, and renin will convert angiotensinogen into angiotensin. Angiotensin 1 is still an inactive hormone. Okay, so it's kind of like an intermediate step here. Angiotensin 1 has to be further converted into angiotensin 2, and it is converted by what we call ACE, okay, or angiotensin converting enzyme. Okay, angiotensin converting enzyme is found mostly in your lungs. Okay, and that's because all the blood that's in your active circulation is going to be passing through the lungs. It's just the most efficient way to activate angiotensin 2 the quickest. Okay, and so angiotensin 2, that's our active hormone. Okay, angiotensin 2 is going to cause vasoconstriction. Okay, angiotensin 2 is going to decrease urine output. It's going to stimulate release of ADH and aldosterone from ADH comes from the hypothalamus, and well, it's made in the hypothalamus, released by posterior pituitary, and aldosterone comes from the adrenal glands, and it also stimulates the thirst center. Okay, so angiotensin 2 is going to decrease urine output. It's going to increase ADH, increase aldosterone. It's going to activate thirst center, and it causes vasoconstriction. Those are the things that angiotensin 2 does. Okay, but again, we kind of already know this because it was from the cardiovascular system, so we've already talked about these. Antidiuretic hormone is the hormone that has the most direct effect on water itself. Antidiuretic hormone comes from is made by the hypothalamus. It is released by posterior pituitary, and it causes increase in aquaporins. And increase in aquaporins means that you're going to reabsorb more water back into your body, and less water will be found in urine. Okay, so that's That's ADH, kind of short for that. High doses of ADH can cause vasoconstriction, but under normal ADH conditions, you're not going to really see that. The major thing is the water reabsorption. It also activates thirst center as well. Okay, so that's our antidiuretic hormone. The next hormone is, and the stimulus for ADH is angiotensin 2, or low blood pressure, or low blood volume, which has to do with low blood pressure, and then also increase in blood osmolarity. Okay, if you have less water in your blood, the osmolarity is going to be higher, the concentration would be higher. Okay. All right, aldosterone. Aldosterone is stimulated by low blood pressure also, like the previous two. It is also stimulated by increased potassium or decreased sodium levels. And aldosterone is going to regulate sodium-potassium balance, really most directly sodium. It's really both. So what aldosterone does is it increases formation of sodium-potassium pumps. If you increase production of sodium-potassium pumps, you are going to be reabsorbing more sodium, and you're going to excrete more potassium, as these two are going to move in opposite directions. As aldosterone is increasing sodium reabsorption, it is also increased water reabsorption. Okay, and because sodium pulls water with itself, okay, with it. So whichever way sodium moves, water will follow it. It's a very very much a follower of the sodium. Okay, so that's our aldosterone. So yeah, I told you that the renin-angiotensin is the longest one. And then the atrial natriuretic peptide, this fourth one, is the only one that's going to respond to high blood pressure. It responds to increased blood volume. Okay, and if you have increased blood volume, you also have increased blood pressure. Okay, so it's called atrial natriuretic peptide because it comes from the atrium of the heart. So as the atrium gets more stretched, this is released, and AMP is going to inhibit angiotensin or renin-angiotensin system. It is therefore also inhibiting ADH and aldosterone, since angiotensin 2 is one of the things that promotes release of those two. This atrial natriuretic peptide, will inhibit these, and it will then also cause increasing glomerular filtration rate. If you have watched that animation, this is one of the questions, like what does AMP do to the glomerular filtration rate? And when you think about it, if you have increased blood pressure or increased blood volume, to fix that, you're going to have to get rid of some water, okay? And that would decrease your blood volume. But if you're experiencing higher blood pressure and higher blood volume, what that means is your kidneys are already like working over time. There's increased filtration in your kidneys. Glomerular filtration rate is happening at a higher rate. It's kind of stressing out your kidneys, honestly. And so AMP comes, and what it's going to do is it's going to increase that filtration rate even more. Okay, it seems kind of weird because we're already experiencing this. And AMP is going to increase it even more. The reason for that is that we're going to get rid of water faster, and so, we're going to kind of stress out the kidneys more than they are already, but it's going to last shorter and we will return back to normal faster, okay? So that's our AMP. That's hormonal control of the fluid output here. The last part of this chapter is acid-base balance, and let me see if we have. Do we have a picture for this? I guess I'm gonna use this one, this figure right here, and I don't know where that is in your textbook. Hold on, let me see. That's on page 1020. This is figure 25.1, and it kind of summarizes what's going on here. Okay, so before we talk about acid-base balance, let's just kind of talk about what are acids and bases. The acid-base balance is also referred to as a pH balance, and it involves regulation of hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. Hydrogen ions are this H plus, okay, that's hydrogen ion. And then the HCO3 minus, that's bicarbonate ion. Hydrogen is your acid. Bicarbonate is the base. If you have something that's acidic, you can add base to it and they will neutralize each other, okay? So that's why we're talking, when we're talking about these guys, we are talking about their balance. They can balance each other, okay? So if you have something that's too acidic, just add more base to it and it will reduce the acidity, and vice versa. There are so there are several things that are important during acid-base regulation. We can see that hydrogen changes in our body based on 4 different things. It varies based on, or it depends on the input of acid. So how much acid or base are you putting into your body, or is your body receiving? The output of acid and base would also alter your pH or affect your pH. A respiratory rate as well as tidal volume. So respiration or respiratory system is going to have an effect on acid-base balance as well. And then chemical buffers, buffers are kind of like sponges for acid or base. So in our body, there are 2 major classes of acids. We can talk about fixed acids, which are also known as the metabolic acids. And these are from metabolic processes, metabolic reactions that are happening in your body. Like lactic acid, okay, if we're talking about anaerobic respiration in your muscles, lactic acid forms, okay, it's an acid that's formed from a chemical reaction. Keto acids from digestion of lipids is also a fixed or metabolic acid. So fixed acid is anything that does not involve carbon dioxide and water reacting with each other, because that's the other acid that's volatile or respiratory acid. Okay, so all the acids are metabolic acids except for the hydrogen ion that's produced when carbon dioxide from your respiratory system or from the carbon dioxide that's associated with your respiratory system reacts with water. Okay, and carbon dioxide is a gas. Okay, that's why we call this volatile acid. And you've already seen the reaction for this. So for the reaction of what the carbon dioxide does with water, it's CO2 plus H2O, and that gives you acid. And that exists in the equilibrium with H plus HCO3 minus, okay? So this is kind of how that works. And when we talked about respiratory system, we already said, like, if you have too much of this because your respiratory rate is impaired, then this reaction happens faster or more in your body, and that would make your body more acidic because you're making more of this. Okay, so but we'll get to that here in a minute. Okay, so we have fixed acid, metabolic acids, and then respiratory acids, which is this. Okay, we regulate acids in our body by 2 mechanisms. The kidneys are going to regulate your fixed acids. Kidneys regulate your metabolic acids from the metabolic reactions in your body. And then respiratory system will regulate the volatile acid, okay? And then overall, like the pH of your body is a balance between these 2, okay? These 2 systems work together to keep the pH where it needs to be, okay? So kidneys regulate fixed acids by either eliminating hydrogen ion if the conditions are too acidic and reabsorbing more bicarbonate, or doing the opposite, okay? If the conditions are too alkaline, then you would be reabsorbing hydrogen and eliminating bicarbonate. And some things that cause hydrogen to increase would be our diet. Our diet, as we mentioned this at some point already, is rich in animal protein, and so these things add acidic molecules into our body. So that's that. And yeah, so that's what your kidneys do in a nutshell. Okay, they normally regulate your acids and bases like this. You can look at that clinical view that talks about vomiting and diarrhea and how they change the hydrogen ion concentration. So if you think about vomiting, if you vomit, you're losing the contents of your stomach, but you're also eliminating acid. Okay, conditions in the stomach are acidic, so you would be having less of hydrogen ion in your body, and diarrhea actually causes the opposite because you would be losing bicarbonate there. Okay, that's kidneys. Now, respiratory system and how it regulates the volatile acid, we've already talked about during the respiratory system chapter. Okay, so increasing your respiratory rate or increasing the depth of your breathing would be eliminating more carbon dioxide out of your body. And if you're eliminating more carbon dioxide faster, then that's going to decrease the rate of that reaction that I had written just a little bit ago. And that's going to make pH more alkaline, okay? Because you're not going to be producing as much. And the opposite is true as well. If you decrease respiratory rate, then you're breathing slower, you're not eliminating the carbon dioxide as fast out of your body, and the reaction that produces the hydrogen ion and bicarbonate happens more, and you would have a more acidic condition there, okay? So that's normally what the respiratory system and kidneys, how they regulate the acids. There is another thing that has to do with regulation of acid and base, and that's the chemical buffers. What I want you to know about buffers is that buffers are molecules that are able to absorb excess acid or base. So they're kind of like acid or base sponges, and this ability of these molecules to bind free hydrogen or free bicarbonate is ensuring that the pH doesn't jump too high or too low. Because if you think about where the pH is supposed to be of your blood, for example, pH of your blood is supposed to be between 7.35 and 7.45. We have a fairly narrow range where we have to keep that pH. If it gets out of that range, you're risking denaturing of your proteins, and that's bad. So we have a bunch of chemical buffers that are going to help with binding excess acid temporarily, so the pH can jump up and down like this. And the three main buffering systems that we have are phosphate buffering system, and phosphate is PO4 3-. Then we have a protein buffering system. So there are certain proteins that are able to absorb or bind hydrogen ion temporarily, as well as bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is your most important buffering system, okay? Remember that, okay? Bicarbonate is the most important buffering system in your body. I'm going to show you how phosphate, even though bicarbonate is the most important, I like phosphate. And so I'm going to show you, let me go to a blank screen so I can write this. You can see how phosphate is able to bind acid, okay? So phosphate, I've mentioned, is PO4 3-. This is a chemical formula for phosphate. Phosphate, if it meets a free hydrogen, this is H+, it can react with it, and I write double arrow because this is reversible reaction here. It can react with the hydrogen ion, and it can create HPO4 2-. Okay. Now notice that 3 got reduced to 2 because we had H+ to it, and so that reduces that overall charge. Okay, hydrogen ion was a strong acid. Strong acid, that means that it has a big effect on pH. This HPO4 is not a strong acid, it's a weak acid, okay? And then the HPO4 2- can meet another H plus, and what I can do is then create H2PO4 minus. Okay, this is also weak acid. So when it's in this state, it doesn't have as much of an effect on the pH, okay, than if we just kept it like a H plus, like a free floating H plus. All right, so that's kind of how buffering system works. That this is temporary right here. It can release the hydrogen and will eventually. It's just a temporary control of the pH in your blood. Okay, and that's your buffering system. All right, now we're going to look at the acid-base imbalances and what that does. So I want you, for the buffering systems, just know what a just general definition of a buffer, and then the 3 types of buffers and which one is the most important. I'm not going to make you write this equation right here. Okay. Yeah, so let's talk about the imbalances here. And I seem to have misplaced my notes, but that's okay. So for the imbalances here, okay, because sometimes there can be things that can disturb this balance of acids and bases, and we can divide them into respiratory system induced acid-base imbalances, and then the metabolic induced acid-base disturbances or imbalances. So for the respiratory system, we know, and we've already talked about these with the respiratory system section, okay? If a person is hyperventilating or hypoventilating, okay, this is going to change the available carbon dioxide that's in your blood, and it's going to change the reaction rate of the carbon dioxide with water, okay? If you're increasing your respiratory rate or you're increasing your tidal volume, you're getting more carbon dioxide out of your body than you would normally do. That causes your pH to increase because you're getting rid of some acid. Okay, you're getting rid of carbon dioxide, so the level of acid is lower, and so it's more alkaline. And opposite is true. If you're decreasing the rate of breathing, then you would be going towards the respiratory acidosis. You have buildup of carbon dioxide in your body, and it's not leaving your body as fast as it should. Respiratory acidosis is the most common out of all your disturbances, out of all your imbalances. And the reason why respiratory acidosis is the most common is because of how many people are actually experiencing problems with their lungs compared to other conditions that could cause other imbalances. The respiratory system one is and the acidosis in particular is the one that's the most common one, where your respiratory system is impaired because of COPD, emphysema, or lung cancer, something like that. It's just those conditions are more common than any other conditions that can cause acid-base imbalances. So yeah, that's respiratory acidosis. We know okay, I talked about the respiratory alkalosis as well. So we're done with the respiratory system. For metabolic acidosis and alkalosis, this is where it's not the respiratory or a volatile acid that gets affected, but it's the metabolic acids, okay? And so yeah, that's that. So it could be because your kidneys are impaired, not eliminating acid or base fast enough, or it could be some other things that are going on metabolically wrong with your body. Ketoacidosis is a very good example. Ketoacidosis happens with excessive lipid digestion, okay, where and actually this is a good example to talk about compensation here. So because disturbances sometimes can happen to both of these types of acids, whether it's metabolic or volatile, the two different systems can compensate for each other. So if your volatile acids are not being regulated efficiently by your respiratory system, then kidneys can take over and help eliminate or or help eliminate metabolic acid or base, just to bring the total amount of base or acid in your body to the normal range. Okay. And if your kidneys are not able to keep up and regulate the metabolic acid well enough, then your respiratory system can compensate for that, and your body will experience change in the respiratory rate to make up for the downfall of your urine or of your kidneys. So ketoacidosis is a good example. Ketoacidosis would be a metabolic acid-base disturbance, because ketoacids are formed from lipid digestion. Okay, so diabetics are very prone to ketoacidosis if we don't regulate the levels of insulin in the body. And so what happens if your body is not producing enough insulin, and you're not giving yourself enough insulin, and you're low on insulin, is that after you eat a meal, your digestive system is going to absorb nutrients. Nutrient levels in your blood rise. If you do not have insulin, your cells cannot use glucose. Okay, so what that means is your blood has too much glucose. Your concentration of glucose in your blood is higher than what your body can actually normally like reabsorb, and will actually end up with some glucose being eliminated in your urine. So you have all this glucose in your blood, and your cells are just yelling, like, we're hungry, feed us, we can't use this glucose. Your cells cannot use glucose if you don't have insulin. Insulin is a link between glucose and a cell. So you have these cells that are, that know that there's this glucose, but they just can't use it, and so they're starving. Starving cells are going to reach for the next best molecule for energy, and that is lipids. And so you're going to see increased breakdown of lipids, and keto acids are a byproduct of the lipid digestion, and that's a normal thing that happens. But in a person that's experiencing the lack of insulin, this is going to happen way too much. Okay, so there are all these keto acids in the blood. The pH of the blood would start to fall down because it's getting more acidic, right? And so what your body would be doing in this case, and that's one symptom of ketoacidosis, is increased respiratory rate. Okay, so what your body is trying to make up for this buildup of metabolic acid by increasing respiratory rate, getting rid of the carbon dioxide, decreasing the level of volatile acid, so that overall pH is maintained as close to that appropriate range as possible. Okay. Ketoacidosis is not the same as ketosis. So we've talked about this with some of my students before, because usually people, when they hear ketoacidosis, they think of the keto diet, which keto diet is supposed to put you in ketosis, not ketoacidosis. Okay, ketoacidosis can actually be fatal. So that's like when that goes too far. Okay. So the two systems do compensate for each other. The kidneys are a little better at compensating for respiratory system. The respiratory system is more limited, because if you're trying to decrease respiratory rate to regulate the amount of acid, there's only so much where you can decrease that respiratory rate before you're anything efficiently enough. So kidneys provide a better, more stronger compensation. Okay. So I think there's this nice clinical view that is spread on 2 pages, and on page 1028 and 1029. So look at that. That shows you how the compensation actually happens. And that's that. That's the end of chapter 25. So there's only one part for chapter 25. Some of this was already a review, not a whole lot of stuff that was completely new. And so yeah, that's that. Make sure that you're paying attention to the due dates for the assignments. I will send a reminder with everything, just so you don't miss it. But I did map some of those to be earlier than the exam date, because what I've noticed is people will go, they will do their test and then they will do the assignments. Well, that's kind of defeating the point. Okay, you're supposed to be doing those assignments as you're studying for this. So, you know, when you're studying the structure of kidneys, go and label that kidney on the model. That's when you're doing that, okay? And not leaving it to the last part. We are almost done. We have 2 more chapters, chapter 28 and 29. These are going to be the fun ones. The reproductive system. We'll be talking about genetics a little bit, and then we are done. I can't believe it is already here. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.